Hi, this is Ofori, the digital reader, and I kind of went mad in March, and I added 20 new books to my library. So I actually am going to split my new books for that I got in March into two parts, do about 10 books each, and also I got to cut back on that. It's just so many of the books that I have in my library are either older books, and so I don't have a lot of new stuff like within the last like 5 years. Even when I bought books during that time, I bought older books, and now that I'm watching a lot of booktubers, they're recommending these books that are like new and hot. So I've been picking up a lot of those. Another is I've been really enjoying a booktuber called Kalila, and I've really been looking at a lot of her recommendations and picking them up because they're not in my wheelhouse. But the way she describes them just sounds like something I want to try. So I've got this new thing I'm going to be trying, and that is every month I'm only going to get new books that are equal to the number of books I read the previous month. So in March, I read 4 books, which means this April, I can only get 2 books. If one month I read 6 books, although they got to be short ones, but still, if I have a month where I read 6 books, then the following month I can reward myself with 3 books. That way I feel like I'm always going to be cutting into my current library, and every now and then I can add a new book to my list, and I feel like that way I can always kind of cut into my library. I have a ton of books in my library, so it'll be years before I get to the point where I'm like, oh, I need to buy more books. But at least that's my plan. So even if it's part of a series, I'm still just going to go with that I'm allowed to purchase half as many books as I read the month before, and that's going to be my reward for reading. So let me get started with the first part of the books I bought in March. This was a recommendation by Kalila. Eleanor Oliphant is completely fine, and it's a romance. This will be my first like straight up romance that I've read. I've read, of course, books that have had romantic leads and romance in them, but they haven't been straight up romances. So this will be my first romance. The next book that I'm getting is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. Once again, recommendation by Kalila. This is also it's got a little bit of fantasy, but pretty much it's a straight up romance with a heavy bit of fantasy built in. But it's not like classic fantasy. It's more like light fantasy, or kind of more like fairy fantasy rather than like D&D or Warcraft type fantasy. So I'm interested in seeing how this is. This is about a female scholar who's kind of introverted, and she's kind of trying to find out some secrets about a particular fairy, and she goes kind of on this expedition to find out more about this fairy, and she meets up with a colleague, and romantic hijinks ensue. So it'd be interesting to see what's going on with that. Another Kalila recommendation, The Night Circus. I mean, pretty much whenever she reads a book, if it's not like a completely fluffy romance, I've probably added it to my queue. But Night Circus, and wasn't 100% clear about what it was about, but she liked it. But basically, the description: the circus arrives without warning, no announcements proceed. It is simply there when yesterday it was not. Within the black and white striped canvas tents is an utterly unique experience full of breathtaking amazements. It is called Le Cirque des Rêves, and is only open at night. And I think what this is about people going to the circus, and it's kind of a fantasy island vibe where everybody gets something particular from it that is particular to them. So I'll give it a shot. Convenience Store Woman. This is a book, once again, recommended from Kalila. I mean, to be honest, I would probably say 80% of the recommendations that are not books I normally read, I probably picked up from watching her tubes. But Convenience Store Woman, when she talked about the book, it really resonated with me. Basically, it's about a woman who is fine with her life. Everything's going good, but the pressure from society that should be happier and she should be doing more intrudes upon her. And then she begins to try and chase that, we kind of call it keeping up with the Joneses kind of thing, so that she can live what people call a more typical happy life. The Yellow Wallpaper is a book about a woman who is, I guess the best way I can put it is being put upon by an overbearing spouse and how she deals with it. Swordheart. This was another booktuber. I don't remember her name, but she was talking about some cozy fantasies. I'll have a whole nother video about cozy fantasies because I feel like some people are really kind of stretching the idea of cozy fantasy quite a bit into kind of what they like. And if they like a book, then all of a sudden it's a cozy fantasy. But that's, like I said, another video. But anyway, she liked this book. It's basically a description is Hala is a housekeeper who has suddenly inherited her great uncle's estate and unfortunately his relatives. Sarkis is an immortal swordsman trapped in a prison of enchanted steel. When Hala draws the sword that imprisons him, Sarkis finds himself attempting to defend his new wielder against everything from bandits and roving inquisitors to her own in-laws. And the sword itself may prove to be the greatest threat of all. So, I'm always down for fantasy, so let's do it. So, Krazy Kat by Cantor is kind of, the honest truth is, I accidentally bought it. And what happened is that I watched it, and I included it in the description, but I watched this YouTuber who basically kind of does a history and backstory of different famous graphic artists. And one of the graphic artists that he did, George Harriman, very fascinating. I included the link. Very cool story because it also talks about kind of like the rise of comics and comic strips. But George Harriman basically made this strip called Krazy Kat, and it became very well known. So I actually was going online to purchase a book of George Harriman's Krazy Kat comics, and I accidentally purchased this, which is Krazy Kat, which I'm diving into because it sounds incredibly interesting, but basically it is an existential novel that uses the Krazy Kat characters in the novel, and it's basically a novel about them. So I'll see how it is. Palace of Illusions. Now, I've kind of been on this kick where basically when I'm reading, I'm coming up with like recommendations, like 5 books I would recommend. So, if it's action or hero fiction, I'm coming up with lists of 5 books that I'm going to be recommending. And one thing I wanted to do is come up with a list of 5 books that are I recommend that are alternate takes on classic mythology. So I've been reading some books that are classic, that are new takes on classic mythology, and this one is a classic take on Indian mythology, and I thought I'd give it a try. I'm going to read this, and I still want to read a couple more books that are classic takes on different types of mythology, and then I'm going to kind of come up with a list and make a video about that. Like I said, right now I think I have about 4 different lists in the works of 5 books that I would recommend. And if I have like 4 books I would really recommend, then what I do is in my reading for the following month, I'll try and pick a book or 2 that will help me flesh out that list to see if it's good enough to recommend. World War Z. I haven't really been a fan of horror books, and I'm still trying to stretch myself. I think I'm really going to struggle with horror books that are a little bit too psychological. I might try some later, but I'm kind of easing myself into it, and I kind of feel like easing myself into it with zombies is going to be easiest because most zombie books are going to be pretty action-packed because, well, you're running from zombies. So I figured I'd give this a shot. It was on sale, and so I picked it up. And then The 7 Husbands of Eleanor, Hugo. This has been hitting the rounds with a lot of booktubers who are highly recommending it. Kalila enjoyed it immensely and recommended it, so I'm going to give it a shot also. Now, I should admit, some of these books I might not read till next year. But the way I'm doing it now, as I mentioned, is I'm going to reward myself by allowing myself to buy half as many books as I read the month prior. And that, of course, means the more books I read, the more books I can buy. But I'm always bringing down my queue. And I already have my TBR for 2024. It might change a little bit, but it would really only change if I get close to finishing off my TBR. Now, my goal every year is going to be to read 24 books. And I'm doing good enough that I actually gave myself a TBR that is making an assumption that I'm going to read 3 books a month. That's not my goal, but that's what's in my TBR. So if I really, blow through that and I find I'm getting low on my TBR, then I'll add some more books to my TBR. But a good number of these books I probably won't read until 2025, but that's what happens when you have, 1,400 books that you haven't read in your library. So this is part 1 of the books I read in March. This is Ofori Murray, the digital reader, and keep reading.